Okay, let's get more analysis on the inquiry. We're joined in studio by political analyst Professor Susan Booysen. Professor, thank you very much indeed for your time. Always a pleasure having you here in the studio. Let's look at day one. It's likely to be a complex commission, isn't it? But what's your impressions in terms of the terms of reference? Are you satisfied?
Yes, it could go any direction. It really will depend on what people bring to the table. As Deputy Chief Justice Zondo said, people should please come forward. And we know it can be incredibly complex. There is an investigating team, what they can bring to the table and whether they are being blocked in access or not. We also heard some very disconcerting warning signs there about security clearances not coming through, etc., and maybe not enough, not a huge load of new evidence so far. So it could, when it has bated breath on this, because it could still go the direction of, we all know the Seriti Commission and how big containers full of evidence was never investigated, how certain types of evidence was disallowed, and it's going to depends so much on Deputy Chief Justice Zondo on where it is going to go. These are early days. Yeah.
What do you make of the Deputy Chief Justice saying that he's pretty much disappointed with regards to the public coming forward and offering evidence?
For me, there was a big red flag going up there because we know it's such a closed world and people could cover up their tracks incredibly well. One could just think back a few years ago, there was the book Panama Papers. That is not just a 101, it's an advanced course in how to cover up tracks. We know from experience that the state capture people have been incredibly good at covering up these tracks, and that it is the little personal experiences here and there, the fakey mentors, SABC journalists, etc., who are brave enough to come forward, who've got that specific evidence of specific personal approaches. Those ones are pretty incontrovertible when people go under oath and testify to that.
We have the a Treasury staffer lined up first up for today. But in terms of the others, Jonas, as well as Mentor, are you expecting explosive evidence and different from what has been in the public domain?
Probably not at that level, because they were some of the few ones who have been able and have been brave enough, courageous enough to come forward. And I believe we've already heard much of the thrust of their evidence. It will be very interesting to see whether the investigating teams could have come up with some additional evidence of corroborating. It will be very interesting to hear Zuma and Gupta's legal teams arguing, cross-examining, and seeing how they try to discredit these people. That will certainly happen, and so it will up to these people to stick to their guns and hopefully bring up additional evidence, corroboration if there is.
Professor, stand by. I just want to go to this clip. ANC, NEC member Zizi Kodwa says corruption is one of the major challenges that South Africa is struggling with. Kodwa was saying that corruption must be dealt with decisively, and he hopes that the truth will come out at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture.
The challenges we face momentarily, that's why we must deal with them decisively. Issues of corruption, for example, we must deal with them decisively because corruption is the enemy of the people and the enemy of the revolution. The ANC at the moment is not on trial. Even if you talk about state capture, for example, the ANC is not on trial. We're the first to call for the establishment of the Commission on State Capture. Those who appear who may have information, we ask them to be bold and courageous enough to help the Commission to achieve its objectives. They do so in their own personal capacity, not on behalf of the ANC.
Well, Professor, the ANC has released a statement also urging its members who are summoned by the Commission to fully cooperate with the Commission. But what impact is this Commission likely to have on the governing party?
If this commission works, and it's a critical public out there, people have seen these commissions before, they're wondering whether it's time-buying exercise and whether it could be sabotage and end. But if it works, it can really be a turning point for the ANC, because the ANC, as governing party, is at that crunch point where it has to show that it can do better, that it can govern better, that more in the interest of the general people rather than exclusive and corrupt few. And if the ANC ANC can prove that, and this commission, if successful, can go a long way to doing that, much of the doubts about current day ANC as governing party and its big failures as governing party could be put to bed.
And it's bearing on next year's elections. Look, it's going to go, what, over 2 years or so?
2 years, yes.
So in terms of the run-up to the elections?
You know, it is one of the crucial potential turning points here, because the ANC needs to show that it can govern better, that it's serious about doing that, and we are all the fightbacks against President Cyril Ramaphosa at this stage, and it's people who are afraid that they will be revealed and that there will be further corruption charges and investigations, and it is that fightback against President Zuma that a commission of inquiry like this could help to counter. It could give tentative evidence to a very cynical electorate out there that this is a governing party that will create the legal space, the Judicial Commission of Inquiry space to put an end, if it's possible, or at least make a definitive dent in that corruption that is so diffused through the state.
Let's talk about the former president, Jacob Zuma. How important is it for him to come forward and give evidence? We understand reportedly that he was invited to give evidence. How crucial is that?
That is, I don't think everything turns on that, but it is very crucial. And because we know from past history, he's a master at saying, I have no recollection of that, not as far as I can recall, to the best of my knowledge, not those kind of evasive statements. One would like to think that under oath and under cross-examination, that will not be possible to bring those kinds of defenses. But then if a person says, I cannot remember, no recollection, etc., then there's very little that even a Judicial Commission of Inquiry can do. But we have to remember, this is a commission that former President Zuma really did not want. It came from Thuli Madonsela's State of Capture report, and then it was only in a nick of time when former President Zuma was at the risk of being fired by his NEC and was given the ultimatum, appoint this commission, that it was actually appointed. That was after he had previously challenged it and lost in court. So it's a commission he does not want, but let's hope he is going to be there. And he can be more specific that his memory will be good on that day.
If you look at the terms of reference of this commission and the commission's purview, do you think it has teeth in order to, get the results in terms of the recommendations and execute it?
Execution, of course, it can make recommendations for further criminal investigation. So it's quite tentative at that point. It cannot prosecute itself and prosecute people itself. And so it is not definitive on that point, but it will be very difficult for investigative and prosecuting authorities to move, to jump over definitive and incriminating evidence. If that is delivered and the commission is very certain about its findings, it will very much depend on how those findings are phrased at the end of the day as well, and the legal and constitutional implications of those findings. If those are strong enough, then it will be a very good point for further investigations and prosecutions. But let's remember, it is a long, long time. It's one of these festering wounds in the political psyche that just does not want to go away. Some of the allegations that we'll see being interrogated in court in this commission have been coming for 7, 8 years. And in the very early days of the Zuma presidency, those originated. And it can be going on for a good another 2 years. We know the duration of this commission. And then if there are further investigations, prosecutions recommended, 2 decades is mind-boggling, but that is a possibility.
How technical is this commission likely to be in terms of getting to the nub of the issue? Are they going to look at phone records? Are they going to look at tracking companies in terms of tracking the vehicles? I mean, how deep does it go?
It can potentially go there. It has got investigative powers and it has got good, apparently seemingly solid teams working on it. And we know even Thuli Madonsela's report had those kind of phone records in there. I have little doubt that it will also be interrogated at that technical level. And we know the way judicial teams and evidence-leading cross-examination works. If they can find the smallest technical detail to counter some allegations, possibilities, then those will be used.
It's going to happen over at least 24 months, isn't it? And it's likely to be very expensive as well.
It is, but then it's probably not going to be nearly as much as the corruption that we've seen, not a fraction of those costs. And if one takes the amount of confidence, it can potentially restore in a South African state and governance systems in the democratic system, because it was the governing party that had gone wrong, let's hope just at that stage and not more permanently than that, that had given the cover for this political abuses, political state bureaucratic finance abuses to take place. And so both the governing party and the democracy system of South Africa have got much to win through successful proceedings at this commission.
I guess it's all about exposing unlawful and damning and improper conduct, isn't it?
It's about exposing it. I would think it's even more about to show that it doesn't stop at exposure. In a way, we have exposure already now. To show that that justice is being served, that it's not fine to go about and abuse state resources in this way, to show that we are actually a republic of consequences.
How important is it for the public out there to pay attention to this commission?
I think it is very important. It is much more than entertainment, bizarre political entertainment value that comes out of that. Because I think the citizenry is astute, they are well informed, they are very cynical by now. And I think for citizenry to be able to demand accountability, it is very important that they learn even more about how things can go wrong in the system of governance, and thereby hold our elected peer representatives and their bureaucratic appointees accountable, and help the ruling party, any ruling party, to be able to exercise that kind of insistence on accountability, and not to let big leaders have a free day and discredit a whole government system.
From your assessment, Professor, leading up to this commission, how bad is the rot in terms of corruption?
I think it is pretty bad. It goes pretty deep, and so many people are involved. Granted, many people are not involved, and that is what's the savior of the system to this day. But so many people at all levels are involved, and it's very often that they've been manipulated, and ones with weaknesses, ones with a blotch on their public records or private records even. They've often, and we see it among some of the people who will be giving evidence today and in the coming weeks as well, they were pulled in by the Zuma system, if not by him and his associates personally, and they were exploited in those type of weaknesses. And I think that is one of the big things we should be watching out for in future employment, in deployment too, in public positions. Are those people who are really astute, or are they people who can wield power and be held to ransom in a way, because they have weaknesses that they dare not see exposed?
Prof, I know you got to go, but thank you very much indeed for your insight. Always appreciated. That was Professor Susan Booysen, who's a political analyst. Yes?